Hey everybody, Mac here for OCR Kings, and today we're going to talk about building a Berlin wall.
Now the goal here is to create our Berlin wall with as few steps and as few pieces as possible. The least amount of steps makes it easier and faster to build, and the fewer pieces means it'll be easier to transport and to put up and take down. This is important to us because we're going to be moving this thing out into the woods, setting it up, training on it, and taking it down when we're done. And we're most likely going to be doing all of this at night. If that's not an issue for you, you might find it handy to be able to put it up and take it down if you don't want to have a big old Berlin wall sitting in your backyard creating an eyesore and pissing off your neighbors or your landlord or your spouse. So, we're going to use the following. One piece of 8x4 foot half-inch plywood cut into two 4x4 sections, 4 8-foot 4x4 fence posts, and 7 8-foot 2x4s. To hold it all together, we're going to use 3/8 inch diameter hex bolts of varying lengths and a handful of 2-inch and 3-inch screws. First, lay out 2 fence posts and then place your 4x4 sections of plywood on top. Make sure the edges of your plywood are flush with the edges of your fence posts. Take 8 2-inch screws and temporarily tack down the plywood to the posts. Place your screws 2 or 3 inches from the top and bottom corners of the plywood. This will hold the pieces in place while we drill some holes. Next, grab a tape measure and a pencil. Measure 6 inches down from the top of the plywood and 1 3/4 inches in. This is going to center us on the post below, since 4x4 posts are really only 3.5 inches wide. We're going to do this on the bottom edge of the plywood as well, 6 inches up from the bottom edge and 1 3/4 inches in from the outer edge. Repeat this process all around the horn. Now, get your drill, preferably with a leveling bubble, and drill 3/8 inch holes straight down through the plywood and the posts along your 8 pencil marks. It's a good idea to label your pieces since it'll make it easier during assembly later. I marked the top edges with A and an arrow to the sky so I'd remember that these go up top. And the bottom piece with the letter B and arrows pointing down so I'd remember that this edge touches the ground. At this point, you can remove the temp screws and put your plywood pieces off to the side. I'm going to label the posts, R and L, for right and left, obviously, as well with an arrow reminding me which end is up. These are uprights, which we will reattach our wall face to later. Okay, now in an effort not to bore the shit out of the audience, we are only going to show you construction of one upright. Obviously, you'll repeat this process later on for the other side, so pay attention! Take your tape measure and another fence post. Measure and mark center at 4 foot. Take your tape measure and measure 1 3/4 inches from the edge, finding dead center. This post is going to be the footer, the piece that lays on the ground to which we'll attach our upright. Go ahead and label the footer, right or left depending on which side you're working on. Take your upright and lay it on top of your footer. Make sure you have the up arrow on your upright in the right direction, meaning pointing up. Roll the footer into position so you can see the center mark. Take your upright and center it on the center mark of the footer. Now you may want to draw 2 straight guidelines, 1 3/4 inches in either direction of your center line to bracket in your upright. Slide the upright down so that the edges of the upright and the footer are flush. You may want to use a square to check your angles as well. Measure 1 3/4 inches up from the bottom edge of the upright and 1 3/4 inches in from the outer edge, so you'll be centered on the upright and the footer. Mark it with your pencil and then grab your drill. Sit or kneel on the upright, keeping your drill level, and drill down through both the upright and the footer. Take the upright off and make sure that you've gone all the way through the footer. And if you need to, you might want to take your drill and go through the holes a couple of times. Now, grab a 2x4 and put it on top of your footer. Make sure it is on top of the side of the footer with the center hole in it. Square off all the edges, top, bottom, and the sides. Measure 3 inches down from the top edge and 1 3/4 inches in from the outer edge. Hold the 2x4 down tight and drill a hole straight through the 2x4 and the footer. You may need to go through each a couple of times. This is going to become the inner support beam of our A-frame. Label the beam for the side you're working on and which direction is down to the footer and to the ground, in other words. You might want to give the support beam and footer matching marks for the corresponding holes. For the outer support beam, we're going to need an extra piece to account for the support beam that will go underneath. Grab a 2x4 and measure out and cut 2 6-inch pieces. Take one of the 6-inch pieces and lay it on top of your footer on the same side as your center hole and the inner support beam hole, but place it on the opposite end from the inner support beam hole. Square off the edges, drill some pilot holes, and tack it down with 4 3-inch screws. Flip the footer over. Measure 3 inches from the end of the post and 1 3/4 inches in from the outer edge and drill through both the footer and the attached 6-inch piece. Get an 8-inch hex bolt and slide it through the footer and the bottom hole of the upright. When the wall is standing, the footer rests on the ground on the outside of the upright. So lay the footer on the ground, 6-inch section facing up, and the upright on top of it as you slide the bolt in from the bottom. Rest the unconnected end of the upright on another fence post. As a note, you may want to place some of the 3/8-inch nuts under the post to account for the bolt heads on the other side. This will keep everything level as you're working. Adjust the upright so it's as square as possible. Place a washer and nut on the bolt and hand tighten. Take an 8-inch bolt and slide it through the footer, 6-inch section, and your outer support beam. You can grab a washer and nut and hand tighten if so desired. Go to the other side and slide a 6-inch bolt through the footer and inner support beam. Attach with a washer and nut if so desired. Now go to the top end of the upright. Cross the support beams, outer beam over the inner support beam. I cross them up at the top with about 3 inches hanging over on each side. Tack the beams down with a 2-inch screw each and drill a level hole through them and your upright. Take the temp screws out and make sure that you've drilled through everything with a wide enough hole to allow the bolts to easily slide in and out. Okay, on to the wall face. First, grab a 2x4 and measure dead center at 4 foot and then cut it in half. Do this twice. These will become the horizontal supports for the wall pieces, which get 2 each. We're only going to show 1 wall piece being built in this video, so repeat these steps for the second piece. Take the 2 4-foot pieces of one of the 2x4s you just cut and lay them out parallel to each other. Grab one of your 4-foot sections of plywood and lay on top. Go around the horn and make sure that not only the edges of the 2x4 are flush with the edges of the plywood, but also that the 2x4s are centered with the holes we drilled in the plywood earlier. This is very important. You'll see why in a minute. Next, drill some pilot holes through the plywood and the 2x4s and screw them together. Use 4 2-inch screws for each 2x4, spreading them out evenly in a single line. Once the 2x4s are firmly attached to the plywood, place the drill with the 3/8-inch bit right through the holes we made in the plywood earlier and drill straight through the 2x4s below. Do this, obviously, for all 4 holes. Once both wall faces have been assembled, take the remainder of the 2x4 we cut the 6-inch sections from for the footers and cut off a 40-inch piece. It's a good idea to sand this one down a bit because it's going to be the top edge of our wall and we want it to be nice and smooth when we grab a hold of it. You can attach this piece at any time, but I found it easier to center it once the wall was upright. Put it flush to the top edge of the wall on the same side of the wall as your horizontal supports and attach it with 6 2-inch screws. It's a good idea to drill your pilot holes and have your screws in the 2x4 before you go and attach it to the wall. It'll just make life that much easier. To assemble this bad boy, it's a good idea to lay out the pieces in the order they'll be put together. So, start from the inside and go out. From center, lay down your wall sections face up, followed by your uprights, then footers, then inside and outside upright support beams. Follow the labels and the arrows written on the pieces to ensure you have them all going in the right direction. It's also a good idea to have each of your bolts ready to go with 2 washers and a nut. First, put the wall sections on top of the uprights. Slide a bolt through a washer and then through the front of the wall face and upright. Do this for one edge only for both wall faces. Don't attach the washers or nuts yet. Go to the other side and attach those 4 holes with washers bolts. Once that's done, go underneath and attach washers and nuts to all 8 bolts of the wall face. Next, slide 1 footer forward and align the footer center hole with the corresponding upright's bottom hole. Make sure the 6-inch section of the footer is facing outward. Go to the inside of the upright and slide an 8-inch bolt through a washer and then the upright all the way through the footer. Attach with a washer and nut, hand tighten only at this point. Go to the other side and do the same thing. Grab an 8-inch bolt and washer, go to the top edge of the wall and lift upright. Be careful. Okay? This thing is pretty heavy, and if it dropped on you or anyone else, somebody's going to get a little fucked up. So, keep a hand on it at all times and try to stay to the outside of the fall line. Slide the bolt through the washer and the inside of the upright support beam hole. Hang onto the wall and grab the inner support beam. Slide the support beam onto the bolt and temporarily put the washer and nut onto the bolt, hand tightening only. Grab an 8-inch bolt and washer and slide it through the inside of the footer's support beam hole on the side with the 6-inch section. Grab the outer support beam and slide it onto the bolt and hand tighten with washer and nut. Go back to the upright, remove the washer and bolt and slide on the outer support beam. Hand tighten the washer and nut. Go to the footer and attach the inner support beam. Repeat these steps for the other side, starting with the upright and inner support beam, followed by the outer support beam and footer, then outer to upright, and finally inner support beam to the footer. The last step is to go around and tighten all the nuts and bolts. Nice!